Good evening, everybody. Who are we? So before we go into anything too elaborate, I still want to talk to a couple of our crew members down below decks. I think we still have to talk to Rex, maybe Ashley, and definitely Tally. Don't want to forget talking to Tally. Because we do have, as the thumbnail may have indicated, we certainly have some quests to do having to do with some of our squad mates. So we're probably going to do some of that tonight. We're probably going to do go back to the Citadel, talk to some people there. Hi, Kylie. Good to hear from you. That kind of thing. So that should probably lead us to talk about all sorts of things. Or if there isn't a particular kind of topic that comes to mind, we can always discuss what's brought up by our reading group series. Also, there's always more things worth discussing that may just happen across my mind. That sort of thing just tends to happen. If WizKid shows up, he and I were talking about criminal law and what constitutes criminal law and why and all that fun stuff. So that might also become a topic of interest. So we'll see how it goes.
Commander?
Do you have a few minutes to talk? One-on-one?
I'm off duty until tomorrow. I was gonna have a small drink. Bit of a celebration. If you're interested.
What's the occasion?
It's Armistice Day, when the first contact war ended. My family always marks it. Since I'm the only Williams aboard, I thought I'd ask you.
So just to clarify, I don't know if he's actually going to be here or not. I know he's been a little busy once in a while, so we might jump in later. We'll see. Yeah, why
Sounds
not?
like an odd thing to celebrate. That was 26 years ago.
In our family, it's not really a celebration, more like an obligation. Don't tell me you don't know about my family. My commanders always find out. It's not in my files or something?
That strikes me as odd that, it was 26 years ago, as if that was a long time ago. And this seems like another one of those weird timescale things for Mass Effect. That 26 years ago was when the first contact war ended. Basically within, less than 30 years. Since humans have known that there are living aliens and that we've been interacting with them. That's less than Shepard's been alive. So that's fascinating to me. Now, I will say something worth noting. One of the things that actually did come to mind is I kind of prefer it to the alternative. But let's finish this conversation, and I'll talk about the story writing alternative to having an accelerated timescale, sort of the opposite end problem of the kind of overly static world that a lot of other IPs, I guess you can call them, a lot of other universes tend to suffer from pretty bad.
There's almost nothing in your files. Technical scores and a list of crap assignments.
There's a reason for the crap assignments. I'm General Williams' granddaughter, the commander of the Shanxi garrison in the war. The only human ever to surrender to an alien race.
I see. That's why you drive yourself so hard.
A Williams has to be better than the best, if only to avoid suspicion. That's what my dad told me the night before he retired. Takes a special kind of thick-headed to march into a job where your family's blacklisted. I did it anyway. I'm not gonna let our name go down with Arnold and Quisling. Granddad deserved better than that.
Further, her grandfather was a general 26 years ago. I can buy that. And her dad has since retired, probably some time ago, I get the impression. All in the span of 26 years. So how old were any of the... and especially keeping in mind that humans tend to live like 150 years or so in Mass Effect. Like 150 is the new 90. Human lifespan is nearly doubled in this game. So in this game's setting. So you would think timescales would be a little more stretched out rather than compressed so much. Anyway, it bugs me a little bit. Just have to say. how Kylie says she's so full of herself. Kind of, but you can kind of get why. She's really compensating. Like, really clearly, she's compensating for kind of having to be that way. Or at least that's how she sees it. She has kind of an inferiority complex, and that makes her need to act out to the contrary, that kind of thing. At least that's the impression I get from her. Not that she's going to be around forever, so don't worry if you're frustrated by her. That's all I'll say.
Your grandfather after the war.
He was relieved of command as soon as Shan-Chi was liberated. They brought him back to Earth in irons, but there was never a trial. They quietly demoted him and stuck him behind a desk. He retired a year later and spent the rest of his life working construction in the colonies. Sometimes we hear about attempts to get him exonerated in some official way. Nothing ever comes of them.
As I recall, your grandfather held out for a long time.
The Turians wrecked the orbitals in the first wave and occupied the major cities. They sat in orbit, dropping rocks on anything that moved. Granddad dispersed the troops, but when they went into the cities for supplies, the Turians would wreck a block to eliminate one fire team. Civilians were dying, his troops were starving, and he couldn't contact Alliance High Command. So he surrendered the garrison.
Is this why you're always going on about the Council?
If everyone else can look at Shan-Chi and say, this is why humanity needs to be stronger, then so can I. I'm entitled.
Oof.
So now you know. Gonna kick me off the ship, Skipper?
Yeah, no. But yeah, that's I get where she's coming from, to a degree at least, but still, calm down, ma'am.
You're part of the team, Williams. I don't care what your grandfather did or didn't do.
Not to get all cheesy, but you're the first CEO who's ever said that to me. Thanks, Skipper. But anyway, I've got things to do before we land. I'm sure you do too.
Dismissed, Chief.
Ma'am.
Kylie, I kind of get the opposite impression. So Kylie says it seems like she's trying to relive her family's glory days through overly talking about her family's achievements. Kind of, but that doesn't seem to be her family's reputation. Her family seems to have a really negative reputation. Like she said, her granddad was the one who was the only human to ever have surrendered to aliens. That's not a good reputation. That's not really a glory day to relive. Now, maybe she's, so maybe we can say like she's trying to put a positive spin on it, that kind of thing. You know, she's trying to rehabilitate her family's reputation. That's probably true. But you know, that's pretty understandable. I mean, that's a hell of a reputation to live down. Rather than, and I think I should, yeah, I think I'm right to say live down instead of live up to, right? Because you know, she wants to compensate for what she sees as her family's shame, rather than live up to family honor, that kind of thing. So let's see if Rex has anything to say.
What do you want, Shepard?
Why did you become a mercenary?
Lots of reasons.
Such as?
Such as, I needed to get out of our system. I needed to eat. I needed to survive.
Why not stay and help your people?
I tried to help. That's why I had to leave.
What happened?
I was betrayed. I was head of a small tribe. We were trying to restore order after the war, but the other tribes were against us. They followed Jared, one of the few warlords who survived the war with the Turians. But he was old, and so were his ideas.
This was well over 1,000 years ago, by the way. Or no,
He
800
wanted
or
us
so.
to fight. Turians, Solarians, each other. It didn't matter who, as long as we were fighting.
Yeah, so I just got done talking about the extremely compressed timescales, and now we get the opposite, which is nice to see. There is a hell of a dynamic in galactic history here that what he's talking about, happened centuries ago. Rex is really old. He's, I think, close to 1,000. And I think what happened here, what he's describing, was about 800 years before the current events of the game. So Kylie says, so she basically tells her family's story as a failsafe and an apology for her family's action. Yeah, I think so. Part of it was also, I think, assuming, kind of like Joker did when we talked to him about his disease, but assuming that her commanding officer already knew, assuming it was in the records, assuming it was just kind of common knowledge. Which, I mean, it probably was common knowledge about her grandfather, General Williams, surrendering. I'm sure that Shepard heard about that, like, in military school, right, in the academy, but maybe didn't make the connection that that was the particular Williams that was on her ship. That doesn't seem like... Williams is probably a pretty common name, I would think. It is nowadays, so... There's even an Ash Williams in another popular, I guess call it sci-fi movie series. So, yeah, there you go.
What did you want?
I just wanted Jared to shut up, to stop his ranting. I wanted him to stop leading the tribes astray. But he couldn't understand how much things had changed. We didn't have the numbers to go to war. Even if we did, the genophage made sure we couldn't replenish our numbers fast enough. I told them all to forget about war. We needed to focus on breeding, at least for one generation. And for a while, we were getting through. Some of the tribes started coming around.
So Kylie says Rex is space Oogway. I'm too old to know what that means, so maybe you can clarify. Sorry.
I take it the warlord didn't appreciate that.
No, he didn't. He arranged a crush with the tribes. A meeting on neutral ground. He wanted to talk. We met at the Hollows, near the graves of our ancestors. The skulls of our dead laid bare to remind us where we come from, and where we all go. It's as sacred as any Krogan place can be. Violence is forbidden.
Sounds like a trap to me. You must have suspected as much.
I did. But when your father invites you to a crush, well, there are some laws that even we hold sacred.
Oh, okay. From Kung Fu Panda. Yeah. Yes, but he's a little bit more prone to violence than Oogway, I think. It's been a little while since I've seen any of them. Actually, I haven't seen I only saw the first one. I haven't seen the second and third. But yeah, I think Rex is a little more prone to fits of violence. He's calm for a Krogan, though, I will say.
Jared was your father?
He was, until that day. We talked, but we didn't get anywhere. When it was clear that I wouldn't join him, he gave the signal. His men leapt from the graves of our ancestors like Krogan undead. The few that were loyal to me died quickly. I escaped with my life, but not before I sank my dagger deep into my father's chest. That is why I left, and that's why
very
I'll
stabby.
never go back.
Very stabby. Anything else about family?
You must have family other than your father. Don't you miss them?
You trying to make me cry, Shepard? I've got some unfinished business with my family, but that's all.
What kind of business?
He does not want to
Before
talk.
I left, I made an oath to my father's. I swore to recover my family's battle armor. It was taken from him after the uprising.
What's so important about this armor?
It's a relic. Useless, really. But it was worn by 5 generations of my family before the war. It's rightfully mine. Originally, it was taken by the Turian military. We weren't allowed armor or weapons after the war. Now, it's in the hands of Taun Actus, a Turian scum who collects relics from the war. He's made millions selling Krogan artifacts that were stolen from my people. He's got several bases where he stores his goods, all fortified and guarded. I just don't know which base has my family's armor.
Just tell me where to start looking.
I'll upload the data to your nav system. But Commander, I want to be there when you find him.
All right.
So long, Rex.
Shepard.
Rex. All right. So yeah, that's going to be one of our side quests that we have to do. We already did Garrus's with Dr. Salion or Dr. Hart, the creepy Solarian butcher guy. So yeah, this will be one of them, and I think we have a mission for Tally. I think she wants us to do something for her pilgrimage, unless it's not yet.
Shepard, I'm glad you're here.
Good to see you smiling again, so to speak.
Awkward.
I'm sleeping much better now. I guess I'm getting used to how quiet your ship is. I still think a lot about my pilgrimage, though. I know Steren's our top priority, but with all the worlds we go to, I was hoping to find something to bring back to the flotilla.
What are you hoping to find?
Usually, people bring back something like a derelict ship we can use for salvage, but I need something bigger. There's a lot expected of me.
What's so special about you?
It's my father. He's the senior member of the Admiralty Board. He's one of only 5 people who can overrule the decisions of the Conclave for the good of the migrant fleet. My father is responsible for the lives of 17 million people. Our entire race is in his hands, and I'm his only child.
So are you some kind of heir to the Quarian throne or something?
No, it doesn't work that way. My father's position isn't hereditary. I'll probably never serve on the Admiralty Board myself.
Ha.
Officially, I'm just the same as any other citizen. But it doesn't work that way in practice. People have always treated me differently because of who my father is.
Yeah, I laugh because, well, we'll see. But in almost all circumstances, she definitely does. Because, you know, the whole save the galaxy from the Geth thing, she accomplishes quite a bit. Kylie's is very much a father theme as far as mini-quests go. Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, yeah, it really is. I mean, companions in general. Obviously you got Tally with her father, which comes back in the second game and then comes back in the third game. You got Rex with his father, which only really comes back in the third. Doesn't make much difference in the second. You got Ashley with her father and grandfather problems. Caden, not so much, I guess. Liara kinda has father issues if you consider her father, you know, not knowing who she is and that whole thing. You do get to meet her eventually, which is neat. Really more mother issues with Liara, but you know, close enough. But yeah, it's there is a big family theme, which I really hadn't struck me. Other than Caden, nice, well-adjusted Caden, whose parents are living nice and retired in Toronto. I think it's Toronto. Might have been Vancouver. Either way, one or the other. Like, unless those are the same thing, and I don't know Canada, which I don't. Oh, jeez. My department chair at St. Leo would be very disappointed that I don't know that. But anyway, let's keep seeing about Tally's family issues before I make an even bigger fool of myself about Canada.
You must get all kinds of special privileges.
I probably had it easier than most growing up, but it's not all good. People like my father have enemies, and they're not above using me to get to him.
That must be tough on you.
My people place a high value on family and ancestry. There's an unspoken expectation that I'll live up to my father's example.
Oh no, if we start singing in the
Everyone's
chat,
waiting
it's never
for
going
me
to
do
end.
Something great on my pilgrimage. Something that will forever change our lives for the better. If I don't, it's like I failed, and that reflects badly on both me and my father.
The work you're doing here is more important than anything any Quarian's ever done before.
Well, that's a little presumptuous.
I know, but you have to understand Quarian culture. We're a very insular society. The events beyond the flotilla don't much matter to the average citizen. Our greatest dream is that one day we'll return to our homeworld and drive out the Geth. But even if we stop Seren, that's not going to happen. There's still millions of Geth behind the veil. Until they're gone, our exile will continue.
What would you need to bring back to make everyone happy?
Something that would help us better understand the Geth. They've changed significantly since the exile. They've continued to evolve. We've done our best to study them, but it's not easy. They're very reclusive. Until recently, they never went beyond the borders of the Veil. And all the Geth we run into now are under Saren's control. We'd need to find Geth operating on their own, independently. But I don't want this to get in the way of our mission, Shepard. First, we stop Saren. Then I'll worry about my own problems.
What was your father like?
It wasn't easy growing up as the daughter of one of the Admiralty. Even before he joined the board, he was a prominent figure. People looked to him for leadership. He had to set an example, and he expected the same of his daughter. Plus, he was pretty strict, a military man through and through. He never allowed me to settle for anything less than excellence. As a kid, I sometimes felt like he was pushing me too hard. But now I'm old enough to appreciate what he taught me. The world doesn't owe us anything. If we want something in life, we have to earn it.
Sounds like a tough upbringing. You don't resent your father at all?
Like I said, it wasn't easy. My father's not the kind of person you bond with. And he wasn't around all that much. Too busy. People counted on him, and he took his duties seriously. Even when he was around, he always seemed a bit distant. Like his mind was always somewhere else. Come to think of it, I can't ever remember seeing him smile. Not once. It's like he was always weighed down by all that responsibility. I mean, I know he cares about me, but he never really showed it. Not in the usual way. I guess the best thing I can say about my father is that I respect him.
Yeah, definitely father issues that need to be worked out here.
Where was your mother in all this?
Mother was around, but she always seemed to kind of blend into the background. Almost like she was overshadowed by my father. He tends to do that to people. She passed on about 5 years ago. Some airborne virus that swept through the fleet. Happens sometimes when the filters start to break down. I think my father took it pretty hard. After she was gone, he became even more focused on his work. I think that was his way of dealing with the grief.
I want to talk about something else.
Like what?
I want to know more about the Geth.
I doubt I can tell you anything.
Okay,
All
now
I
we've
know
already...
is the story of their origins. What they were when we created them, and how they turned on us.
no, we've already
I
talked
want to
about that, I
talk
think.
something else.
Like what?
I should go.
See you later.
God, let's not talk about Winnie the Flu. I mean, we could, but I don't know. No, airborne viruses sweeping through and killing people's parents. That's kind of it's kind of a little painfully topical, you know. Yeah. That said, thankfully, Winnie the Flu, as far as I understand it, is not extremely airborne communicable, only through particulates and such, which is nice. That's much better than a true airborne virus, which is a
Message coming in.
whole separate thing.
Patching it through.
Good work, Commander. You took down the biotics with minimal collateral damage.
Oh, I thought you were okay. Kylie says I meant what her mom died from. Okay, yeah. I thought you were comparing it to the current thing. Yeah, which roughly comparable, but maybe I mean not precisely, but you know whatever. Nothing's going to be precise. But yeah, yeah, things. I was on which note, you know, there is one of the first missions in Mass Effect 2 actually involves a plague and going into a quarantine zone and trying to find a cure and doing all that stuff. So that's even more topical, I think, as well as you know what Arthur Morgan is going through on our other stream. So we'll get to some of the after effects of his particular respiratory disease as we go through. But yeah, if we do get to Mass Effect 2, which I don't know if we're going straight to after Mass Effect 1, depends on whether people want to, or we're going to do something else in between. One way or the other, yeah. That is one of the early quests, involves that sort of thing. So there we go. Get ready for not being as distracted from real world troubles, unfortunately.
I'm sorry we lost some of the researchers, Admiral. The biotics knew what they were doing.
Nobody could have gotten out of there with fewer innocent lives lost. You saved a lot of lives today, Commander. Fifth Fleet out.
Yeah, just as a reminder, this was the last thing we did before we left, which was the last week, which was the thing with the biotics, with the just sort of random people wandering around. Where do I want to go? Not there. Local? No. Let's see if there's anything to pick up on the Citadel. Yeah? If there's anything interesting. Nothing is showing up, so that means there's no priority missions popping up. Alright. Let's go back to the Citadel for now. Wander around there for a bit. Kylie says, yeah, a lot of themes in different games hit different now because of all that's happening. Yeah, very true. You know, when I will say, like, dealing with things in fiction like this is a good way of helping to deal with them in reality. Whether that's just helping you process, or whether that is a kind of call it resilience training. Like, when you immerse yourself in an experience like this, in some kind of fiction, particularly video games. Games are particularly immersive, so it really helps with that sort of thing. It sort of prepares you, in a sense, for things happening in reality. Like losing a friend in a novel, or in a movie that you really care about, or in a series you really care about, or in a game you really care about. Right, losing a character in fiction, I think, is one of the best ways of helping to cope with actual loss. It's a kind of moral training, right? Moral in a sort of broad sense, but it really can be extremely helpful for sort of training ourselves with how to deal with difficult or impossible situations, and difficult or impossible situations that would be impossible to actually rehearse in real life. You know, you couldn't, and you wouldn't want to actually go through terrible experiences like this as a sort of way of training, but you can kind of immerse yourself in it in fiction, and it's a kind of moral training without the particular danger. It's similar to what back when I did martial arts, we had an exercise called mental rehearsal, where you basically, and this goes for any kind of performer, even athletes and things, where you go through what you need to do, what the set or whatever it is, you go through it mentally, and you run through the entire thing, and that will allow you to remember precisely what's going on, and so you can develop not the muscle memory per se, but the intellectual angle of it. Does it matter? We haven't brought Garrus and Tally in a while. Those two are fun. Kylie says it teaches you how to deal with the real life situation because it helps knowing how to act and how to think through and process the event. Books are also really good for that as well. Absolutely, yeah. In part because it allows you to intellectually understand what to do and what you could do and what you should do in a given situation, right? So there is the straightforward, figuring things out angle of it. But like I mentioned, like what I emphasized more is the virtue angle of it, the habit forming angle of it. I think video games are probably the best example of this, right? So if you're playing a video game and you say you're playing Mass Effect. Here. Let's let them talk.
I hope your people are properly contrite, Tally.
Ooh,
As the Turians
that's
are properly
rude.
contrite for releasing the genophage upon the Krogan.
You're assuming that sterilizing them was a mistake.
Oh, that was rude. Oh man, I thought they were mostly nice to each other. That surprised me, man. Okay, guys, calm down. All right. Anyway, yeah. So I'll go back to what I was saying because that was unpleasant. So what I was talking about, though, I wanted to bring up that let's go to the wards, I think. Yeah, let's go to the wards. There's probably stuff down there. So what I was talking about, right, is this kind of virtuous habit formation. Right? So, say you're playing Mass Effect. Suppose you're doing what I'm doing. And you play through the game, and you go full Paragon. Right? So you make the impossible, heroic decisions. Oh yeah, we blew it up. Our bad. Whoops, that was the AI we blew up. But if you go through and if you do the good heroic thing every time, right, part of what that's doing is it's training you to make the right choice in situations that you would never and could never encounter in real life. Right? It's not like you're going to have the chance to choose whether to save the galaxy or not, or anything like that, right? Or choose whether to, whether and what massive sacrifices to make in order to do the right thing. Right? But by training yourself to make the choice in the hard case, what you're doing is you're making it so you're more capable of making the right decision in the real circumstances of your real life. Oh, he's not here. I really want to get a good shot, a good recording of the guy here who is the space racist guy. Because there's a great little space racist guy there who makes who I really want to make a video about, but that means I need to get a nice solid recording of it. Ooh. Okay. Ooh. Okay, just dust himself off. All right, how about this guy?
Yeah, what is it?
Why were you tossed out of there?
Doran didn't have a clue what I was doing. He assumed I was cheating.
I know Doran. If he says you're cheating, you're cheating.
I was just tipping the scales in my favor. Only as an experiment.
Still
Okay,
sounds
yeah,
like
sure.
cheating to me.
To you, maybe. But this device is merely intended to simulate situations and record results. Recording losses is easy, of course. Nobody notices those.
Why do you need to record these outcomes?
Now you're getting to the heart of it. I've spent the last 5 years developing a system that can accurately predict wins and losses on the Quasar. I just need a few more recorded wins and I can complete the algorithms.
Can you do that? Isn't that illegal?
It's illegal to use my system, but I won't use it. I'll sell it to others. I just need a few more wins recorded.
That's a really fine distinction.
I think I'll take my chances the old-fashioned way.
Suit yourself. Well, I have some calculations to do. Goodbye.
Okay. Yeah, no thanks. Not this time. Kylie says TV shows can also lend help as far as teaching virtue and morality in more extreme situations. It's complicated, though, because some get so immersed in the show that their mind forgets their own emotions and ways of coping. Rather adopt a character from the show, from a TV show's ways. TV show's ways instead. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, even a sort of paragon of virtue, even a good example, is not a perfect example, just by necessity, right? Any example, any heroic example or a character is going to be a particularization of a universal. It's not going to be simply, the form of heroism itself. It's going to be heroism particularized to certain circumstances. Shepard isn't the hero. Shepard's a hero, right? In other words, so what that means is if you're going to consistently act like your favorite hero, you're gonna start making mistakes because your favorite hero isn't in your particular circumstances. Your particular circumstances dictate what you need to do, and so if you're simply emulating and aren't extrapolating away from that, aren't abstracting, and then reparticularizing, well, you're not doing moral philosophy, really. Or even you're not training in virtue, you're just sort of training in sort of aping what somebody's doing. I feel like that's kind of a racial slur in Mass Effect against humans, but because we're the only primates around, but whatever.
Hey there, welcome to Flex.
Oh, okay, we already helped her. let's go tell Doran that we were just told to cheat.
Welcome to Flux. Name's Doran. What can I do for you?
Oh. Yeah, okay.
Goodbye.
Enjoy your time here at Flux.
Okay. Never mind. Quasar, by the way, is space blackjack. But it's not blackjack. It's Quasar. Because it's in space.
Hey, Jenna came back looking for work. Thanks for getting her out of Cora's den.
I was glad to help out.
Yeah, everyone seems real happy to have her back.
And yet, you seem less than pleased.
I'm glad she's out of the den. I'd just forgotten what it was like to have her around. I haven't had a decent tip since she got back.
Oh, we helped the pretty sister, apparently.
Hey, good to see another human in here.
Man, that's, yeah. Man, there really is a lot of, family squabbles. It's ironic that there are a lot of family squabbles this stream, compared to last stream, where we went and shot Liara's mother. So, that seems like that would be, that would have been the family squabbles episode. But no, it's this one, apparently. Yeah, So, one of the things I was talking about is with respect to timescales. Right? Because I was mentioning timescales, and I was mentioning how Mass Effect tends to really shorten the timescale, particularly concerning humans and our contact with the rest of the galaxy. Even in general, right? So there are civilizations we know about that have been around for thousands of years. Not necessarily spacefaring for that long, but for at least 2,000 or 3,000 years, like the Asari. But that's understandable. First of all, for the Asari, that they are, the Asari are very, very long-lived. A generation for them is 10 times as long as it is for us. Go away. Yeah, okay. Where's Septimus still around? No, he's not. Still want to get a screenshot of Septimus to make that meme out of that I was talking about 8 weeks ago or whatever. Oh, well. So it does make sense that the Asari have been in canon around for basically forever. Their civilization has been. But at the same time, changes in the galaxy do happen relatively quickly. Whether that is the Rachni War leading directly into the Krogan rebellions, whether that is whether that's what we see with humans, whether that's what we see between the conflict between humans and Batarians that we wind up seeing, any of that stuff. Yeah, let's go back up to the Citadel, the Presidium. That's it. Right, so that's one alternative, right? We have these.
Helix has settled out of court with a Krogan group that had accused the Genetics Corporation of fraud. The Krogan group had contracted Binary Helix to perform studies with a long-range goal of curing their genetic sterilization. The group later sued for a return of investment money when the study produced no viable results.
I think that becomes relevant on the next planet, if that is the foreshadowing that I think it is. In any case, though, right, so what we have in Mass Effect is a very, very dynamic setting. Things are constantly changing over time, albeit not really throughout the course of this game or even the 3 games so much. Not to a great extent. But the timescales are short, but realistic, right? It's realistic that things would change. The contrary, which is probably worse from a writing standpoint, from a fiction standpoint, is the kind of extremely static setting. Right. Usually you see this. This is probably most common in like medieval fantasy settings.
Of Eden Prime, we present another profile in courage.
Oh hey, we helped her. Her husband. We helped her.
A devoted wife and talented chef, Serviceman Batia joined the Alliance military under the Deferred Education Plan. After finishing her service, Batia planned to open a restaurant. Instead, she gave her life protecting the colonists of Eden Prime. For more profiles in courage, or to explore opportunities in the military, please visit the Alliance Military on the extranet. Keyword, courage.
I feel like the extranet is like AOL, apparently. Seems kind of silly, but anyway. So the alternative of this kind of stasis, this kind of unchanging throughout massive lengths of history, like I said, is very common in like medieval fantasies. Right? You hear about it's a really common trope that the hero wields his father's sword that was passed down through his family for generations. I mean, we even kind of see it with Rex and his armor, but at least he admits that the armor is purely ceremonial and is an old relic and not worth using. Right? But when we hear about this kind of stuff in like medieval fantasy settings, you use the sword that was passed down your family for generations. I love this.
The production will open dramatic theater to the Elcor with a Hamlet who uses Elcor body language and pheromones. Kit claims that he's also excited by giving a human audience the chance to judge Hamlet by his deeds and not his emotions.
Neat. I actually totally would like to see the like Elcor Shakespeare plays, that kind of thing. Like I'd love to see the little spin-off media for franchises like this. Anyway. Yes, Kylie, I was about to get to Star Wars. That was one of my key examples. We definitely see this kind of, this especially technological, but also social stasis in Star Wars. It's really bad. Really bad. I just happened across a massive example of this, which is what really brought it to mind. But going back to the sword example, I will get to Star Wars. Don't worry, I promise. Like using your great-grandfather's sword, or using the sword that your great-grandfather wielded, is wildly unrealistic at any point in real history. I really appreciate what you're doing. Oh, I didn't get to this yet. Right, so if you look at any point in the actual history of the Middle Ages, technology was actually advancing quite rapidly, particularly weapons technology. Like, technology with respect to arms and armor.
Commander, any word on my missing men?
I'm not sure how to tell you this, Admiral. Your men were killed by a thresher maw.
A thresher maw? That's not... My men wouldn't just stumble into a thresher nest. Not the entire unit.
Somebody lured them there with an Alliance distress beacon. Placed it perfectly so they'd land right beside the thresher nest.
Damn it. I had a bad feeling about this ever since my team disappeared. An Alliance beacon used as bait, my unit wiped out, and nobody seems to know anything about it. Commander, I appreciate what you did. Now I need to do my part. The families of those Marines deserve to know why they died.
Anything you need from me?
Not right now, Shepard, but I'll let you know as soon as I find something out.
All right. So you can help him, so we are probably going to wind up helping him at some point. I think it's one of those things where we just kind of wander around the galaxy until we happen across where he needs us. So we'll see how that goes. So I want to talk to Emily Wong first as well.
Hello again, Commander. I've got a proposition for you. Since you helped me get information on the crime syndicate, I've gotten a lot more backing from my publishers. I'm investigating traffic controller conditions now, and I wondered if you could help.
That seems like a step down from wide-scale corruption.
Actually, in a way, it's more important. This isn't about people getting rich. This is about safety. I've heard rumors that the space traffic controllers are overworked to a dangerous degree. I can't get into the control room, but you could. If you planted a bug inside, I could crack the story.
This bug you want me to plant, could it interfere with traffic signals?
Absolutely not. I made certain that the frequencies it uses won't interfere with anything.
What will this bug allow you to pick up?
Just audio and video. I'm not trying to tap into the traffic control system if that's what you're worried about. I just need to hear and see them in order to correlate their activity with traffic efficiency.
Everyone knows space traffic controllers are overworked. How is this news?
There's a difference between overworked and dangerous. Traffic at the Citadel has increased by 300% in the last century, but traffic controller resources haven't kept up. We already have several last-minute wave-offs per week. Do we have to wait for a full-blown disaster?
If you crack this story, what's likely to happen?
Ideally, there will be calls to improve working conditions by hiring more controllers and upgrading systems. The Council won't pay for improvements voluntarily. This story will provide that pressure.
I can't promise anything, but I'll see what I can do. Give me the bug.
Excellent. Just place it on a terminal with a good view of the area. Thanks again for your help. In the long run, this story is going to save lives.
Yeah, so basically a Consumer Report story kind of thing. Neat. You know what? I'm just going to quick travel there. Save some time. CSEC. That's where it is. So yeah, the idea of passing on a sword down through several generations, that kind of thing, is... So if you know anything in particular about the advance of medieval technology, you'll know this is absurd. A lot of people don't realize this because we kind of get the impression that the Middle Ages were just sort of we think of it as sort of the Dark Ages, which really couldn't be further from the truth. So if you think about the difference between even like let's just go with a 11th century arming sword to a 13th century longsword, or 13th, 14th century longsword. If you look at the difference there, it's roughly the same as the difference between a musket and a modern assault rifle. There is a reason that the trend moved from one-handed swords and shields to two-handed swords, and it was advancements in steel, in metallurgy. You can make a longer, stronger blade once you have spring steel, and once you have blast furnaces. So you don't need a thick, relatively unwieldy, relatively short one-handed sword. But then further, even more than that, you also now have lighter, stronger, and more wearable armor that will protect you from basically anything, so you don't need a shield. Right?
A research station on Noveria has reportedly been destroyed. The exact cause is currently unknown.
Hey, here we go. So if at any point, really, if anyone in the Middle Ages were to use their great-grandfather's sword, it would be ridiculously technologically outdated if it were 100 years old, 200 years old. Even if it were kept in perfect condition, it would be like a soldier going into combat today using an M1 Garand from the First World War. It would just be inefficient. It would not be up to modern standards by any stretch of the imagination. Particularly if it's a weapon that's passed down through 10 generations or something. That's like someone going onto a modern battlefield using a longsword, right? It's just not feasible. So this is one of those big things that you see in, like I said, especially in like medieval fantasy. We have this idea of the Middle Ages that it was just kind of one time period, that everything was sort of the same, that, the difference, well, for one thing, the difference between using a one-handed sword and a two-handed sword was a preferential choice, rather than a development in technology, because it really was a development in technology. So that's
the commanding
absurd,
officer
right?
Is aboard. XO Presley stands relieved.
But I think in Mass Effect you don't get that, right? Eventually you do find a relic weapon, like an assault rifle from the First Contact War, and it behaves very differently from other weapons you use, and this is in Mass Effect 3. So it behaves very differently from other weapons you use. So there is, you can see, even in the short period of time here, like 20-something years, this extreme change in technology. Technological advancement, really. That said, I personally really, really like the, what is it? I forget what the hell it's called. It's a really, wait, hold on. I need to check the codex here. I need to check I need to check my journal so I can see where to go next. I did this, didn't I? Oh, I need to inform Emily. Crap. Okay, well, I'm gonna go do that real quick. I don't want to lose out on... Actually, hold on. Let me check as well here. How many do I... Oh, no, I don't want to help. Have I scanned all the keepers? I'm still missing 2. I'll probably go do the rest of those off screen just at some point, just because I don't feel like traipsing around the entire Citadel to try and find it. Anyway, I am going to go back on now to talk to Emily Wong, because that develops later, and I don't want to miss out the opportunity if I don't come back to the Citadel for a while. Anyway, so I'm going to go do that. Let's bring... about Caden and... Let's bring Ash and Caden. Bring our humans.
Equalizing interior
So this
exterior atmosphere.
Yeah, okay, come on.
Logged. The commanding officer is ashore.
So this
has the deck.
Like I said, we see this issue even more significantly in Star Wars. We also see it in some other sci-fis as well. There are weird lacks of technological progress over gratuitous amounts of time. Some of them they give in-universe reasons for it to make sense. Another particularly nasty one is Stargate, where technology does not advance whatsoever for 10,000 years or something under the Goa'uld. So if you've seen that one, that's a bit of a problem. But that's because they're primarily scavengers. They don't invent their own technology, so fine, whatever. Oh, nice. But Star Wars is, I think, probably the worst offender, where we have... Well, first of all, we have lightsabers among Jedi that are passed down generation to generation, but maybe we can forgive that. Maybe we can say, well, it's a ceremonial weapon. It's not actually battlefield effective unless you have superpowers. So, fine. Maybe that's a bad example. But let's look at actual technology. We have starships that are passed down between generations. We have, like, the Millennium Falcon. Now we know was, well, it was shown in episode 2 in Attack of the Clones, and it was still being passed along, like given to the next generation 80 years later. Is it 80 years later? No. Yeah, probably. I don't exactly know the timescales for the sequel trilogy, but it's like at least 60 years later, you know? That seems absurd, because it is a little absurd. That should be an outdated piece of crap ship, not a state-of-the-art vessel, which it's kind of treated like.
I'm already getting readings. This is going to make a great story. Thank you so much for your help. Here, this is everything I've got from my publisher's budget.
It was no problem. Good luck with your story. It deserves to be heard.
I appreciate your support. I hope this will save some lives in the long run. Thanks again for your help. I'm going to show this to my publisher.
I'm still a little disappointed that she doesn't join you in Mass Effect 3, because I think she was supposed to, but she got replaced by basically a voice and face scan of an actual reviewer of the game who basically exchanged a part in the game for a review, which is that's one of the things that kind of sparked Gamergate, if I recall. Okay, Armstrong. Maroon Sea. Argus Row. And not that. Okay, so I got two things in the Maroon Sea. Gemini Sigma. No, not that. None of this. Alright, so I'm going to go to the Maroon Sea next. Maroon Sea cluster. But it even becomes more egregious, right? It's even more egregious than ships like the Millennium Falcon, especially when you go into the extended universe. When you go into the extended universe, this kind of technological stasis gets nuts. Gets absolutely, I mean, I would probably go so far as to say that it's unacceptable in terms of story writing. There's very little excuse. The prime example, my favorite example, is a planet called Onderon. We see it 3 times in Star Wars Legends and canon.
The Council has reportedly revoked the Spectre status of one of its operatives.
We did that.
While the unnamed operative has not yet been apprehended, a Council spokesman confirmed that corrective actions had been taken.
That sounds like it was the Asari counselor. That sounded really diplomatic. Anyway, so the planet Onderon. I realize this. I've just been playing Star Wars The Old Republic, the MMO, a bit recently. and it's one of the newly added planets. One of the recent updates, like since the last time I played it, basically. So we see the planet Onderon 3 times throughout Legends and canon. Twice in Legends and once in the Clone Wars TV series. So the times we see it are the sometime in the 3900s BBY, before the Battle of Yavin, before the movies. Another time about 350 years later, so in the 3600s. And then another time during the Clone Wars, so during the events of the movie, so 3,500 years later.
The commanding officer is aboard. XO Presley stands relieved.
All 3 times, you get to see the capital city. The capital city of Isis. Or Isis? Isis? I think it's IZIZ. It's Isis, I think. All 3 times you see the capital city. It is a large walled city with a large monolithic capital, like, big structure building. All 3 times there is it is a hereditary monarchy. Presumably the same hereditary monarchy. Where did I say I was going? No. Was it Argus Row? Merncy. Let's just check them all out. So yeah, all 3 times, same governmental structure over the course of almost 4,000 years. The same capital city. No other major cities on the planet, which is specified in all 3 time periods. So over the course of 4,000 years, a planet... Oh, sorry. Yeah, let's see.
Shepard, this is Admiral Kahoku. I found out who set that trap for my men. The ones killed by the Thresher Moor. Damn, I hope you get this message. It was a group called Cerberus. An Alliance Black Ops organization. Top secret, highest level security clearance. They vanished a few months ago. Dropped right off the grid. Nobody knew where they went or what they were up to. They've gone completely rogue, Shepard. They're conducting illegal genetic experiments, trying to create some kind of super soldier. I don't have any proof, but I found the coordinates for one of their research worlds. I'm uploading them with this message. They're completely out of control. Somebody needs to stop them. I've done my part. Now it's up to you. This is probably the last you'll hear from me. Cerberus is after me now. I need to disappear before they find me.
Okay, well, let's go try and find Admiral Kahoku as well, because I don't want anything terrible to happen to him. So hopefully we can find him before anything bad does. This is also the first, but far from the last we hear of Cerberus. In any case, so we're talking about Onderon. Yeah, let's see what this is. Yeah, this wasn't anyone in particular's. Let's go with Tally and Liara. That'll work. This wasn't anyone's loyalty mission, so I think we're okay. This was for the guy who wanted to know about the missing thing. Kylie says, it sounds like Princess Leia's message to Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yeah, a little bit. It's that desperate, just before being shot kind of desperation. Let's see, what's all this about? It's a derelict ship, but see if there's anything terrible going on here. But yeah, so Onderon has one capital planet. One capital on the planet, so one capital city. The same capital city over the course of... Oh, that's not great.
Husks. The ship's probably crawling with them.
Finding survivors seems unlikely.
I saw a dot for more. I almost didn't expect that. I should have. You say that. Hold on. Tally, use your shotgun. Right, so it's even the probably most ridiculous part is that it's even the same physical buildings. You know, almost 4,000 years later. And if you think about that in terms of, and it's a stone building. It's a massive stone building. And if you think about that in Earth terms, there is precisely, I think, I could be a little bit wrong about this, but as far as I can think of, there is one city on Earth that still has, that still exists, that existed 4,000 years ago. And I think it's Memphis. Not Tennessee, Memphis, Egypt. The capital of the old kingdom of Egypt.
Clear.
I'm gonna try and turn down, I'm checking my settings. I'm gonna turn down the game volume while I'm doing a lot of shooting, because it's... Here, hopefully that's a little better, so I can talk over it. But yeah, Memphis, the capital of the old kingdom of Egypt, which existed 4,000 years ago. It still exists. It has absolutely none of the same buildings or anything, of course, because why would it, or how could it? Nothing lasts that long. So this is one of those things about I think you're right to point to Star Wars in particular, that is just wildly unrealistic. This idea that things change so little over such incredible stretches of time, that like you can find a piece of technology from thousands of years ago and it can still be not just functional, but it can be better than current technology or something like that. Like, it seems, it doesn't seem, it is implausible. Unless there are very regular sort of regressions in technology that we really don't see, even in the old extended universe. So that is, I think, one of the big faults in the world building in Star Wars, is this tendency towards technological stasis, and also social stasis. The Republic, right? Palpatine says in Episode 1 says the Republic has stood for 1,000 years. That's true, but it was also reformed from the ashes of the former version of the Republic, which was nearly identical to the current version, which before that had stood for like 4,000 or 5,000 years, even before that. So, you know, this is one of those points where there really should be a lot more change.
According to the log files, the ship was out near the Perseus Veil. Looks like they found some kind of alien artifact. They brought it on board, and then... This is really weird, Shepard. They plotted a course straight into the Perseus Veil, like they wanted the Geth to find them.
Interesting.
That artifact must have done something to them. Why else would someone fly into Geth space?
The entries don't make a lot of sense after that. It's like the captain's mind was falling apart. I don't see anything about how they got back into human territory.
The Geth transformed them into husks and left the vessel where they knew it would be found. A warning to other organics not to enter the Veil.
Okay, well that's all there. Right? Yeah, that's it. Alright. Well, let's have our guns out just in case. Actually, you know what? Even more just in case. Get my explosive shotgun. Anyway, so yeah. So that's one of my big issues there, that I think that is really the opposite alternative. Right? So, you know, you can have the weird parts of civilization changing too quickly, like you probably have here in Mass Effect. But the alternative is that nothing ever changes over the course of thousands of years. Everything is basically the same, and that's probably worse. Right? That's probably even more unrealistic. How am I supposed to get out of here? Okay, yeah, I remember this vaguely. This way. Okay, here we go. Oh, that's a labyrinth. Alright, great. Let's switch back. And then put it away. Alright. But yeah, so that is I think one of the things that... So I do a lot of complaining. Probably legitimate complaining about the weird timescales and the sort of crunched, compressed timescales in Mass Effect. But at the same time, it could be worse. Right? It could be that that technology does not change whatsoever over the course of thousands of years, which is far more unrealistic, I think. But you want to do that so you can just sort of tell a very similar story, hundreds or thousands of years apart. And you can't do that if technology changes so rapidly like it does, in real life. That's also why they do it for medieval fantasy, so you can just kind of have the same world setting over the course of a very, very long time. So you don't have to do a lot of extra world building if you're gonna use the same universe, anything like that kind of thing. It makes the writing easier, and it allows you to do a lot of stuff that you otherwise couldn't do. So that's a reason to do it, but it's still, there are some weird, unrealistic elements to it. All right, let's see. What do we got here? Nope. This might have been it. It is, so we will come back to this one. Ooh. So the rings are, for lack of a better term, a piece of massive alien installation art. The rings are made of small pieces of synthetic material and almost invisible from space. From the ground, they catch and scatter the light of Matano, the sun, in picturesque ways. It's not known who created the ring or when. Probably one of the previous cycles. We'll come back to this. Oh, hey. Metallic asteroid. Nice. Use the Force, Shep. I just saw that. Yeah, that's very appropriate. We were talking about Star Wars while Shepard was telekinetically flinging people all around the spaceship. I think that fits. That's very fitting. Okay. Apo. Alright, let's land on Chaska. Let's see what is here. Let's... Garrison Caden. Sound good. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Crap. Who was this? Was this... Alright, Nick, darn it. I have to... Well, it's either Tally or Rex. Oh no. It's one of their loyalty missions. I forget whose. So I guess I'm taking both of them. Okay. Fine. Oops. Forgot to check. We'll find out. If it's Geth, we know it's Tally. If it's a human facility or whatever, an alien facility, then we know it's Garrus. Or not Garrus, Rex. Alright, let's see. Civilian structure. Maybe it's not that. Let's go with the anomaly first. So, with that, I am not too sure what other topics in particular I have to discuss. Although, of course, I'm open to anything that kind of comes up as we're wandering through. I mean, it's always worth talking about genocide because that's one of the things that everyone seems to do in Mass Effect. Because that is Tally's stated purpose for her entire people is to genocide the Geth. If, of course, they are sapient, which, big if, but it's implied they are, but that may or may not be a metaphysical possibility and all that sort of thing. But if they are, then yeah, their entire purpose as a race is to genocide them. So that's cool. That's real nice. No, come on. Oh, I'm disappointed. How am I supposed to get over there? I can do this somehow. Maybe if I go over there. That's a little less steep, it looks like. So if there is anything in particular that we should discuss, I'd be happy to. Oh, no, no, no! Oh! Oh. I might have to leave and come back. This is absurd. I'm going to have to reinsert. Oh, maybe there's. Maybe this. Maybe this over here. Oh my gosh. So the Geth are the synthetic life forms, the robots, right? So to explain for Kylie, right? Currently they're working with Saren, the rogue specter who is trying to bring back the Reapers, this ancient synthetic life form that wiped out the Protheans, the precursor race. The Geth are working with him for reasons we don't know, presumably because they're working, we don't know yet, right? Climbing up the thing is a visual representation of 2020. Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Securing point.
But yeah, that's combat music. What is this? But so the Geth were working with Saren, and they are trying to bring back the Reapers, which will presumably wipe out all organic life in the galaxy, and we don't want that. As for why the Geth have a conflict with the Quarians are the ones who built them. They were the ones who originally built and designed the synthetic life forms known as the Geth. And the Geth effectively rebelled. We find out more of that as the games progress. A lot more in 3, in fact. Some in 2 and a lot more in 3. So we find out, like I said, a little more about what exactly happened. But from what we heard, the Geth rebelled. Right? They gained sapience and rebelled against their creators and drove the Quarians out of their away from their planet and their home system. And out of that sector of the galaxy, even really drove them away quite a bit. There's nothing up here. That's kind of boring, but okay. Let's go over here. So, from what we know so far, the Geth were, the aggressors. They're the ones who drove off the Quarians. So the Quarians really they just sort of want their home back. But the way they propose to do it is by completely wiping out the entire Geth species, right? Clearing all of them out, as Tally was saying. Kylie says, so it's sort of like Dr. Frankenstein versus Frankenstein's monster situation. Yeah, kind of, right? And it is just as morally complicated between the two. Right? There is just as much of morally gray, moral gray areas between them that it doesn't. We find out more about the complexities of the situation later on, but even at this point, it seems pretty obvious that it's not as cut and dried as, the Geth just kind of revolted and tried to kill their masters. Masters is even kind of lending credence to why they revolted, but that they just destroyed their creators because of unchecked aggression and AI going mad, and that all the kind of normal tropes, right? It winds up being a lot more complicated than that, to the point where you can genuinely say that if nothing else, that there is fault on both sides, and that there's no definitive good guy of the situation, and that's absolutely for sure. Right? There is certainly. We wind up finding out eventually that there is no definitive good guy. There was no right side in the initial conflict. Maybe one side was the initial aggressor, but both sides escalated significantly.
How horrible.
Oh,
the entire
it is horrible.
colony must have been transformed.
Burning at him.
Looks deserted.
Yeah.
I've got a bad feeling about this.
Oh, I have to repair my ship. You're my Mako. But yeah, so the Geth and the Quarians have this age-old conflict, which goes back like 400 or 500 years. late 19th century by Earth reckoning, if I remember right. Like 18. Actually, it was like 1880s or something. So 300-400 years at this point. There's more husks in here, aren't there? Yeah, great. How about Rex switches to your assault rifle? Let's do our tech magic. There we go. If I don't go in, they won't all charge me. Because I don't want them to all charge me. Dang it, Tally, come on. Well, I have to go in. So Kylie asks, are Husks Cybermen copies? Similar, I guess. They're basically transformed organics. Organics that are basically sort of injected with nanites so that they are transformed into these sort of, well, husks of human husks that are basically just piloted by the nanites. So they don't still have the like Cybermen still have human brains. It's just they are stripped of emotions and they are altered, right? Husks, it basically just uses the human body as a shell. And it's the nanites, it's the machines that are actually doing anything. So I'm trying to think of a good sci-fi alternative example. If there's another, if there's something else that's relevantly similar. Yeah, Cybermen are similar enough, but I think there are some pretty significant differences that are worth noting. Cybermen are, like I said, Cybermen are altered humans. Husks are, like I said, like the name implies, just the husks of humans that are sort of piloted by robot brain, basically. Right, so they're more like tech zombies than they are like transformed members of another species. More, well, so RoboCop or Terminator, I also wouldn't say so much. RoboCop was still, I think, unless I'm mixing it up with the remake, but RoboCop was still a human. Just with with significant cybernetic alterations, right? To the point where it did alter both his thinking and his action and his body. But at the same time, it was still a human, right? It was still thought like a human to an extent, still used, a human brain and stuff. So it wasn't just a computer piloting a human corpse, basically. Terminator. And so same with Inspector Gadget, right? Inspector Gadget still had his personality and everything too, even. At least in the cartoon, I think. I don't remember if the movie version if he changed at all, if he changed much or not. I don't think so. In any case, though, not quite. Like I said, I think tech zombies is the best way of thinking about it, right? They're man, really, I'm for some reason I am blanking on what else is relevantly similar, because I know there are. I mean, this is certainly not the first time that this kind of thing has been done in science fiction. Whoops, wrong button. Yeah, there's no way. Man. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what would be a good comparison. Yeah, I don't remember the movie as well to make the comparison for Inspector Gadget. Terminator, by contrast, was, if I am getting the lore right, which again, it's been a little while. I think the Terminator was simply designed and created as a robot and didn't really use organic components. It was just nanomachines, or maybe a cybernetic skeleton. Though that's, I'm not exactly sure what they were implying with the 80s, with the 80s special effects. So, presumably though, it was purely synthetic rather than synthetic using an organic body. Right, so the wee, that was silly. But yeah, I'm actually, it's weird. I can't think of a good example. Oh, that's almost something. So you said the TARDIS taking over a human body with the 11th Doctor. She was an alien computer base that animated a corpse for an episode. Kind of. That might actually be, in a disturbing way, the closest example. Now, of course, man, I hadn't made that connection, and I hadn't even thought about that episode for a while. But I hadn't made that connection, really. Because I think the big difference, obviously, would be that the Husks, pretty significantly change the bodies that they take over. Right, so the bodies are obviously, augmented and altered, and, look at them. So the nanites basically consume parts of the bodies that they take over, and then they basically use the musculature and stuff as sort of the organic components of think of it like a robot, But yeah, that might be one of the closest examples, which is weird to think of that as a parallel example, but yeah, man, I really can't think of a good analogy of a similar case. Actually, no. No. I was going to say the human form replicators from Stargate, but even those, not really. They don't take over organics. They just kind of they're made completely synthetic using nanites. So no, not even those. Yeah, I don't know. I really can't think of a good parallel. Yeah, feel free, Kylie. You're gonna be. Kylie says I'm gonna try to think of examples for the rest of the night. Yeah, feel free to. If you think of anything, let me know, because I'm sure there are. They're just skipping my mind, which is odd, because I know I'm not sure if I doubt that Mass Effect is the first to do this. I suspect it's been done before, but I honestly can't think of any examples before Mass Effect. I have thought. Oh, here we go. This is the one we're tracking down, Cerberus. Okay. So a colonial pioneer team rarely consists of more than a few dozen specialists. It's clear that none of them have survived. The Cerberus group has a lot to answer for here. And they sure do. So Cerberus is responsible for transforming these people into husks, which really matches some of the research we find out that they're doing in the later games. Disturbingly enough. But yeah, if you do think of any parallel cases, it's gonna bother me as well. If anything comes to mind, definitely let me know, because I don't know. It's gonna drive me nuts. So again, from a sort of philosophical anthropological point of view, it is worth noting that to make a distinction, so something like Inspector Gadget, right, which I think is the kind of counterpoint, right? Something like Inspector Gadget is still what's his name? Still the guy, right? It's still him. It's just that parts of his body have been replaced to the extent that he can now function differently, right? With cybernetics, that kind of thing is, if it's technologically possible, then that would still be the same person. It would still be a continuity of identity and that kind of thing. By contrast with a husk, the best way to describe a husk is, like I said, a dead body that's just sort of being piloted by machines. We didn't go in here yet, I don't think, in this one. Maybe we did, but let's make sure. No, we didn't. All right. Let's all switch to shotguns for when they get close. Oops. It works. So Kylie says, I'm thinking of Tron, the Disney movie where they made a clone of the guy's dead dad, which is an AI that's void of emotion except for the learned emotions from the original father. Kind of. But it's also implied that these aren't like fully sapient either. Like devoid of emotion or not, the father bot, I guess, from Tron is still thinks with like a human level intelligence and stuff like that. Right, so husks are basically just, robots. They're machines. It's just that they happen to have organic components. God, I can't. It's gonna drive me nuts if I can't think of a good example of this. But really, I can't hit anything with this shotgun, but that's fine. Got him. Anyway, so that was a fun shootout. But no, like I said, the best way of thinking of it is a dead body, right? It's a dead body that is being used. It's sort of being puppeted by machines, right? So the actual person that is transformed into a husk is not a person anymore. The person's dead. Right? It's just that their body is being sort of desecrated and puppeted around and used for, put to military use, I guess you could say. Right? So it's more like, if we want to go with a kind of more fantasy example rather than sci-fi, it's like necromancy. Right? So it's like raising a corpse to fight kind of thing. It's just they're using technology to do it instead of like powering it by magic. They're just kind of powering it with nanobots. That's what Shep has the force for, because I can't hit with stuff with a shotgun. Yeah, pretty much. Listen, there is the reason I can't hit anything with a shotgun is because of my class. I'm a sentinel class. What sentinels do is biotics and tech. So they have biotic powers, force power stuff, and they have tech powers. So they have technology that they deploy. So like the zappy thing, like when I do this, when I throw one of these little boogers that then explodes on somebody's shields, I have those powers too. So basically, I'm a wizard. I'm a caster. And if you think of a wizard or a caster class, in just about any RPG, they're not very good with weapons. And so, if you, once again, look at my squad, my power sets, do you see any weapon training? I don't. None at all. Wait, really? None at all? That can't be right. Not even pistols? I thought I had training in pistols, but I don't. Well, that's bizarre. Whoops. But I can use pistols, right? I can use pistols competently, but that's it. Those are the only ones which I can actually aim down the sights on. So for example, if I switch to my shotgun, that's my assault rifle, whatever. I can't aim down the sights. You hear the clicking? Yeah, I can't aim down the sights. I can just spray, and you can see the inaccuracy there. So, no. So Kylie says, this is probably the closest, right? The closest example. So the tech would be seen as a fungus growth. It grows within the corpse like a fungus. and it makes the husk animated but not necessarily sapient. Necessarily not sapient, I would say. I would go so far as to say. But yeah, I think that's probably the closest analogy. Like those mushroom spores that take over ants, like take over ant corpses. They don't take over ants. They don't make the ant do something. They just animate the corpse, right? Which is really fundamentally different. So it's not even quite right to think of it as something like mind control. It's more like thinking of it as you know, you're tying a little puppet strings to the dead body of the thing and dancing it around and getting it to attack somebody. And now, even if it were sapient, right? Even if the husk were intelligent, right? Even if it had, you know, high-level cognitive function, yada yada yada, all that, it would be a different organism or a different mind, let's say, than the creature whose body it is using, right? So it would be like a computer running. It'd be like possession in that case.
Looks like we've got an active distress beacon on the planet below, Commander. No message, just a locator signal.
Interesting. Notocrux. Notocrux is a case of almost not quite in terms of colonization. Thunderstorms are as common as on Earth, but in Notocrux's thicker, oxygen-rich atmosphere, they are deafening and spark constant wildfires. More damning, however, the large and ubiquitous tufts of pollen that float on the high-pressure air. In humans and other oxygen-breathing species, they cause severe or lethal allergic reactions. Fun, let's land. I think this is more Cerberus stuff, but just in case, let's take Rex and Tally. If I knew what this was, I would probably spec my squad better and not bring Tally. I know it's not Tally. It's Distress Beacon. So let's bring Liara, because biotics. Kylie says, I was watching a Hannibal episode where the killer used comatose diabetic patients to grow mushrooms, so I was thinking the tech would be like that in a way. Maybe? I mean, to an extent, right? I think I get the impression that the nanites do feed on the biological components. They use it for fuel or whatever. So yeah, there's probably some similarities there. Actually, you know what? I can figure out how to solve this problem and find a description. Aliens nonsense.
After the Geths secure a location, they round up and impale dead and living bodies on mechanical spikes. The spikes rapidly transform these victims into withered husks, extracting water and trace minerals, and replacing them with cybernetics. The cybernetics reanimate the lifeless flesh and tissue, transforming the bodies into mindless killing machines. Some Alliance soldiers refer to the husk-generating spikes as dragon's teeth, a reference to the mythological berserkers who sprang up from the earth wherever the teeth of the dragon Eris were planted. Dragon's teeth and husks bear little resemblance to other pieces of Geth technology. No one is sure why a synthetic race would bother to drain the minuscule amount of recoverable resources from organic corpses, though the value of reusing them as shock troops is obvious.
So there you go. That explains. Vaguely. Now, of course, that doesn't exactly tell us where the idea came from, but that is certainly a description of how they work. Yeah, so like the mushrooms, it's very much like the actual real organisms, the mushrooms that sort of take over the ants. I think that's probably the closest example. Oh, Thorian creepers. That's great. These bastards. Guys, remember the Thorian? The big plant monster that was underneath the ground that produced these things? God, these are tough. They're absurdly tough. Wow, that was ridiculous. All right. Nothing there. Put that in here. I totally don't need to loot for this. Loot anything with my current playthrough. I don't know why I'm bothering with all this, but whatever. I am, so. But yeah, so that's basically how husks work. They are not, like I said, they're not the organism that they replace. They are their own separate organism that is using a desecrated body, basically. Oh yeah, kinda. Kylie says the one that looks like a killer Venus flytrap from the Little Shop of Horrors, something like that. Yeah, something similar to that. That is a crashed ship, I guess. That's a weird looking ship, but I guess an anomaly over there, and then a science facility. Okay, it's good to know that there are Thorian creepers here. That's not deeply disturbing or anything. This looks like a thresher maw nest. Nah, it's too bumpy. It's not flat enough. Watch right as I say that. It's going to burst. No, guess not. That's good. Anyway, though, yeah, yeah. That's actually one of the big points about one of the always troubling parts about zombies and zombie-related things, right? Is, for example, a lot of times in more traditional zombie movies, the actual like zombie horror movies, that kind of thing, the heroes or anybody has the moral dilemma of whether you should shoot the zombie, which used to be or is taken over by, your friend, or even just a stranger, but a human being, a person, a real person. So if that's the case, right, then we have this moral dilemma: do you shoot them? Right? Do you kill them? Particularly, do you kill them in like en masse? Right? Is it okay to chainsaw the zombies apart, which presumably is not something that you would do with human beings, even if they were attacking you? Right? That's horrifyingly brutal. Ah, the Jaws theme is playing in the chat. I see. There. Turian insignia. Cool. All right. Where to now? There. You know what? I'm going to go back because I want my human crew for this. So I'm going to come back with Caden and Ashley. If this is what I think it is, and I'm pretty sure this is what I think it is, this becomes particularly relevant to one or the other of them in 2 and 3. So let's bring them. It is far from optimized in terms of like gameplay mechanics, but story-wise, this makes sense for them to be there for this, so let's have them be there for this. The reason being that this is Cerberus, which is a rogue human organization, and that becomes significant later on. So let's go to here next, and then move on to the science facility. So this is a particularly human-centered quest, so let's bring our humans. Right, so anyway, the trouble with zombies is that they used to be people. And the question arises, well, what happens to you if you are a zombie? And usually the sort of... Okay, everyone is just vomiting everywhere now, so that's fun. The best answer to that question, or at least the most convenient answer to that question, is the answer that we're provided with Husks, that they're dead. Right? The person is dead, and the virus or the magic or whatever it is simply using the corpse. They are the walking dead. They are former humans, and now they are zombies. They're not people anymore. The reason that's helpful is because, well, you're not killing people. If you're killing zombies, you're killing something that is not a person, that is subhuman, that is merely the magic or the disease animating the corpse. However, in certain versions, and that is also worth noting, that is what we see with Husks, right? And we see that with later on in later games when Husks are sort of a returning enemy, and frontline soldiers are having to fight them. Ooh, 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 one of my favorite things. One of my favorite places. There's space cows here. I love the space cows. I want to go traipse around them and find my favorite space cow. I have a favorite space cow. That's a cow. It's a space cow. Anyway, so let's go examine our space cows and let's go take a look at these little nice little monstrosities. I love them. Look how cute. Hi, space cow. They have little hands. Creepy little hands. Anyway, so space cows aside, right? We actually get some of this, right, about if we see soldiers sort of being trained to not to think of Husks as humans, because they're not, right? They are dead corpses which are being puppeted and which are being used by these nanobots, right? Controlled by the Geth in this case. Right? And so because of that, what you're really doing is, my favorite space cow wasn't here, sorry, maybe it's somewhere else. We'll keep looking. I may have to look this up if I can't find it, because I think it's on this planet. Because I need to find my favorite space cow. It's very important that I find my favorite space cow. Because that's also something really worth talking about. He's really cool. He or she, I actually don't know. I don't know how to tell them apart. Anyway, space cows aside, right? If it is really just machines puppeting a corpse, then there's no really moral qualms with killing it. It's just a robot. It's like shooting down a drone, right? It's not even an enemy combatant, really, in that case. So yeah, no, not a problem. By contrast, a lot of zombie movies, or zombie stories in general, will have a much more complicated problem, where if it's like rage virus is the next most common version of the sort of zombie plague. And in that case, right, you would probably want to say that, yeah, no, it's actually a human being. It just has something wrong. Right? Even if it's an incurable disease, it's still a human being with a disease. And so just mowing them down, particularly in heinous sorts of ways, becomes morally troubling because you're slaughtering lots and lots and lots of human beings. So that becomes an issue. Right? That's not... that is not as morally cut and dry as you know, killing, well, husks, right? Husks, the things that are not actually humans, things that aren't sapient, things that don't have real minds of their own. They're just, you know, corpses being puppeted. Oh, look, a pod from a Thorian. That's nice, from the Thorian. So this is one of those. So that's really one of those big. Ashley, give us a shotgun. How about that? Uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh. Uh-oh. Whee! I can't hit a damn thing with the shotgun, but who cares? Oh, God. Alright, they're bottlenecked. We're okay for right now. Whee! Well, this was a mess. Are there more? There's one more. One more on my skip. Okay. There he is. Okay. Nice. That was cool. That was very cool, Shepard. All right. Anyway. Listen, biotics, okay, my evil little giggle is because biotics are so fun. Like, lifting somebody helplessly up into the air and emptying your gun into them is just, there's something way too fun about that, and it's just diabolical in the most pleasant way. Particularly if, like I said, it's not actually a sapient life form, and it's in this case a plant being controlled by, well, as we'll find out, nothing in particular. They're just kind of rogue plants. Which also worth noting, plant is a weird description for these things. They are morphologically plants, but they do not act in any way like plants. Kylie says, now I'm torn with either yay, a grenade, or that laugh as your ringtone. Well, you can find this one much easier. Just go back to this recording and note the time. Then, yeah, feel free to use it. I feel like the little giggle would probably make a better text alert. Because it's shorter and a little more subtle. Yeah, I have very little problem with people using my voice clips for things like that. That's relatively innocuous. I know we've talked about things like deepfakes before, and oh, hey,
thank
interesting.
God. See, I told you somebody would come to investigate that signal. My name is Dr. Ross, Chief Exogeny Researcher at this facility. We've been trapped in this room.
Oh, it's you bastards.
We're almost out of food and water. You got here just in time.
I need to know what's going on. Why is this place crawling with Thorian creepers?
How do you know about the Thorian?
I know what Exogeny was up to. I saw what they let the Thorian do to those colonists, so I destroyed it.
Our secret's out then. No point in my lying. You already know the worst. The creepers here were created using altered samples from the specimens on Pharos. We discovered a way to turn them into docile, obedient servants. Everything was going fine until a few days ago. Then all the creepers suddenly went berserk. Only a handful of us made it back into the safety of this room.
Why didn't you send a clear message asking for help? All we had was that signal from the emergency beacon.
This is a closed communications base. Exogeny was worried about someone on the project selling secrets to a rival firm or reporting our work to the authorities. We have no direct communication with the outside, only the emergency beacon. It sends a general distress signal to the Exogeny site on Pharos. They're supposed to send a team to respond inside of 24 hours, but it sounds like they had problems of their own.
You could say that.
Any chance some of the other people at the base might still be alive?
I doubt it. Too many creepers out there. They never stood a chance. We're the only ones left.
Kylie says everything was fine until the Fire Nation attacked. I mean, realistically, everything was fine until Shepard attacked. It's just her. Really, just her. She's the one who killed the Thorian and set everything berserk. Yeah.
Any idea why they turned on you?
Maybe there was still some kind of link between the creepers and the Thorian back on Pharos. The Thorian was unlike any other life form we've ever studied. I can't explain how, but maybe when it died, it somehow set off the creepers here.
I've heard all I need to.
Look, I know what we did here was wrong. I'll admit that. But it's over now. There's no sense reporting this to the authorities, right?
You were in charge of this project. The safety of the staff was your responsibility. They trusted you, and you betrayed that trust.
Be reasonable. I didn't mean for this to happen. Besides, how does it help anyone if I end up in jail? Normally Exogeny would have my back, but it sounds like they're going to have their hands full cleaning up the mess on Pharos. But I've got money. A nice little emergency fund I set up. It's yours if you let us go.
See, I was going to let you go until you started bribing me.
The victims here deserve justice. I have to take you in.
That's not going to happen. Open fire. Open fire!
Okay, yeah. You could say that again. Exogeny's second-rate mercs provided no match for trained Alliance Marine and Spectre. and hero of the galaxy. With the last of the science crew dead, there's no reason to linger here. Well, whose fault was that? Actually, I should have had her switch to her assault rifle for this, but whatever. Oh well, whatever. So that was dumb of them. They really started shooting at the person who they knew killed the Thorian and fought their way to it, and fought their way to you people. Man, none of that was smart. None of that was smart. Bad decisions. Very bad decisions. Anyway. So yeah, that was that. Let's get on out of here. I think I have to go outside before I can just go back to the Normandy at least. Oh, right. I need to make sure that my favorite space cow is not on this planet. Oops. If it is, I need to find it. There. Let's see. Oh, it's on Antaram. Is this Antaram? No, this is Notocrux. Well, that's disappointing. I think I've been to Antaram. Maybe I'll go there next. Yeah, I think I'm going to go there next because I want to. I definitely want to go visit my favorite space cow in the Kepler Verge, in the Newton system on the planet Antaram. Fitting, because we were talking about a planet in Star Wars with a very, very similar name. Antaram. Or Onderon. Not Herschel, it was in Newton. Could have sworn that we found it, or that we were already here. But maybe not. Maybe we didn't actually land. I thought we did. We did. We were totally on this planet. This is the one with the slowly decaying, the moon with the slowly decaying orbit. We were here. Why didn't we find it? Let's take Caden and Liara, just for no good reason. For love triangle reasons, why not? Accept. Yeah, I do. Now, where on Antaram? Southwest corner near a deposit of gold. Interesting. That's where there are cows on this planet. Down here somewhere. Now let's go look. Let's go search for my favorite cow. My favorite space cow. You guys will see. You'll understand why this is my favorite space cow. And also because my favorite space cow is it shows up later in Mass Effect 3. For some reason. Anyway, let's keep on moving. I actually have a story that has something to do with the space cow and has something to do with our the Mass Effect tabletop that we played a little while ago. But I'll wait to actually encounter the thing and say hello and admire how cute it is and stuff before I explain that part. Okay, come on, just go, just stop that. Stop. Oh no. Okay. See, I always it's always fun to consider that there are 3 people in this Mako as it's bouncing around like this. Wee. Who are presumably screaming for dear life as Shepard is driving and laughing maniacally. Anyway, so on to the Space Moo, as Kylie's saying. Yeah. You'll see why I like this one in particular. This is a really, really neat, interesting space cow. So while we're driving, have you had a chance to catch up with the... oh, there's that deposit. Had a chance to catch up with the reading group series. And if you have, what did you think? What have you thought so far? Gold deposit. Oh, jeez. There we go. Okay, surveyed the gold. No, that's not it. Maybe that's it. That's it. That's it. That's my favorite one. That's my favorite. Okay. This is Shifty Looking Cow. Doesn't he just look shifty? Doesn't he just look shifty? The little hands. The little hands. Oh. Oh, what's that? That's interesting. What's happening? Am I losing credits? Is the Shifty Looking Cow pickpocketing me? No. That's not possible. There's no way. How could a cow be stealing my money? Huh? Interesting. That's strange. Well, it steals a bunch of my money because I have a gratuitous amount. Kylie says, I watched another episode and I like the format of reading through it slowly so the audience can understand the material. The Moo obviously has a name. Its name is Shifty Looking Cow. And now it has about 400 credits of my credits. Its name is Shifty Looking Cow with an ellipsis. Hey, what did you just do? What's going on? I love this. Anyway, so this it's Swiper, so you can get a Swiper. No, it has a name, and the name shows up later. Its name is Shifty Cow. I say this because between this, it actually stealing your... It's worth noting, not just stealing your currency, like stealing coins, but stealing your digital currency. That's interesting. Combine that with also with the fact that later on, you see that Shifty Cow has been to the Citadel and has participated in some arcade games, apparently. This guy. This seems to imply that perhaps not all space cows, but certainly this one in particular, might be sapient. So this might in fact be first contact with an as yet undiscovered intelligent alien species. It was very sneaky about it, and it's stealing my credits. Have I lost 1,000 yet? Nah, wait until... I'm going to give it at least 1,000. It deserves the money, putting in all this effort to steal from me. Make him into a meme. He's already a meme. Just look up Shifty Cow. Seriously, just Google Shifty Cow. Particularly if you find Shifty Cow Mass Effect, yeah, you'll find some good stuff. Whoops, what was that? All right, he's stolen at least 1,000 credits from me. I'm good to go. He's still stealing. Shifty little bastard. He's my favorite. Anyway, so he's my favorite. This is my favorite space cow. He's sapient. He is an intelligent alien, and he is staring at me because I walked away from him, and he can't steal my credits anymore. Anyway, so this interesting implication led me to So, as you know, I ran a tabletop game, a tabletop RPG, about set in the Mass Effect world after the end of the 3 games. And one of the things I included, one of the little side quests, was a rumor, which I never actually had my players follow through on because they were boring and didn't like this quest. So we never actually got to do this quest, but I had it written and I had it ready in case they did want to. It was... I need to check my journal first. It was to go to... there was a rumor of a shipment of space cows that it turned out they were sapient. And so they commandeered the vessel and crashed their ship on an uncharted world and set up their own colony. So we were going to make first contact with the Space Cow colony, and it was going to be basically the whole big deal about whether these are the only ones who are sapient or whether it's all of them, and whether you can still eat the other ones who are not quite sapient but are kind of close. So Voyager Cluster, Yangtze. Let's do that. Yangtze system in the Voyager Cluster. So let's do that next. So it's going to be an interesting plot. I would have enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, so we could have done that, but we didn't. Voyager. Yangtze. I will say I have similar reservations about certain Earth species that may be close to sapient. I don't think they, in fact, are, because we don't have any real solid reason to think so. But various Earth species that are shockingly close to being able to abstract, or it seems like some of the things that they do would be, the simplest explanation would be that they can have abstract thought. Example, corvids, so ravens and crows and blue jays. And then even more so, octopi. Octopi seem to be incredibly intelligent by animal standards, or capable of rational abstraction. I will say that seems very unlikely to me. It seems much more likely that they are not capable of abstraction, and that they are just really clever animals. However, that does consistently trouble me, because I do enjoy eating octopus, and I would be loath to find out that, first of all, that they are intelligent to the point of sapience, and that I have been effectively, eating intelligent creatures. But then again, the kind of Mediterranean octopi that I usually eat are probably not sapient. It's probably the giant octopus that can do things like solve puzzles, the large brain ones. If anything it's probably them, and different species are different species. So I'm not terribly concerned. But that does raise interesting objections, interesting... What? No, there's not. Calm down, Caden. Interesting moral quandaries having to do with how close to, or biologically speaking, how close to a sapient species can you get before killing it, and particularly eating it, becomes, at the very least, a morally awkward, let's say, for lack of a better way of describing it. Ooh, that was close. So, for example, I know, our humans' closest genetic relatives are chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are certainly not sapient. They are animals. Heading out. But we have some at least emotional problems with eating them. At least most humans do. Not all, but most do. Now the question, of course, is whether that is morally justified, or whether we ought to or ought not to do so. It seems to me that there isn't a particular moral problem with them, with eating chimpanzees, except for perhaps issues of disregarding life which is so similar to our own, right? We ought to have a certain kind of emotional response to that, and if we don't, then there might be a problem with us internally. Maybe not. It's a tough call. Kylie says, I heard of a story of an octopus who would get out of their aquarium, throw bad shrimp at their owners before. Yeah, I heard about that as well. That's where a lot of the inspiration for Finding Dory came from. That story in particular. With the octopus from Finding Dory, Hank's his name. I know this because Saoirse has a little Hank toy and loves it. Oh, someone got knocked over. Oh, no, you don't. Where are you? There you are. Hey, look. Little bugs. Rachni drones. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing, like showing what appears to be spite. No. No, thank you. Nope. All right, well.
Looks like Cerberus has other bases on this world, Commander.
Yeah, they do. So yeah, that is potentially troubling, let's say. Now that said, if it is not the octopi that might be sapient, then I'm less concerned. Right? Maybe we ought to have more concern for species similar to sapient species. And maybe we ought to, but I don't see a moral obligation not to eat chimpanzees. To put it in a similar case. So eating Mediterranean octopi is not, even if giant octopi are intelligent, eating Mediterranean octopi is not necessarily morally prohibited, although it might be a little bit weird. And maybe we ought to have a negative emotional response to it that may or may not be missing in some people, that kind of thing. And if that is the case, then that brings up its own issues for virtue. It might be a vice. But it's certainly not an affront. Right? It's not something that we have an obligation not to do. It's something that would be better if we didn't. Let's put it that way. There is actually a really significant difference, ethically speaking, between the right thing and the not wrong thing. Right? At least in terms of the difference between obligation and what we would call in ethics, what we would call supererogatory action. Right? Something which is not an obligation, but would be good to do. Things like charity, right? Giving to charity, charitable giving, right? Is not strictly speaking an obligation. We don't owe charity to anyone, otherwise it wouldn't be charitable. But we ought to do it. It's a good thing to do so, right? To give to the needy, that sort of thing. Right? And so we make this distinction between the obligatory and the supererogatory, because some things we ought to do. Well, a lot of things we ought to do. We don't necessarily have an obligation to do them, and it wouldn't be wrong of us not to, or it wouldn't be wrong of us to do so to a lesser extent, right? Because otherwise, you wind up falling into quandaries like it being, morally obligatory to give away everything you have until you're in abject poverty, so long as there is someone who has less than you, which does not seem right. You have particular obligations. Right? That would mean that you're neglecting particular obligations you have, say to your friends, to your family, to your society, etc. Right? So that's clearly there's clearly a problem there, because again, moral obligations can't. Well, under most theories, moral obligations can't conflict. You can't have an enforceable obligation to one thing, and an enforceable obligation to the opposite. This is typically the principle of ought implies can, right? Right? We cannot have an obligation to something we are incapable of doing. This is accepted by most moral theorists. I will admit, I'm a little bit skeptical of this principle. I do think that in some circumstances, at least in a way, there can be, let me put it this way, there can be contradictory normative statements. I ought to do A and I ought not to do A. That is possible under certain circumstances. This is kind of following Augustine. And I think, even Anselm kind of hints at this as well. Scotus, not in the part we're reading, I don't think really does. Bigger Rachni. That's nice. But no, where are they? Yeah, assault rifle. Okay. But basically, you can be in a true moral dilemma like this, where there is no right answer, only if you put yourself into it, right? So you are voluntarily in an unwinnable or a morally impossible situation. Okay, I guess I beat him up. Oh no, come on. Don't do this to me. Okay, bye. Oh, come on. Die already. There we go. Got her. Her, I guess. And fall over. And fly in the air. Okay, there we go. Anyway. But yeah, so I do think that you can put yourself in a situation that is morally unwinnable, that there is no good option. Basically you can be in a trolley problem, but only if you insert yourself into the trolley problem, and only if you become, a moral actor in the situation rather than a bystander, that kind of that sort of thing. Howdy. They are weak to biotics. Alright, I've eliminated the threat here.
Cerberus has been cooking up at the next base.
Alright, there's at least one more on this planet. So let's keep going. But yeah, this is actually one of, probably one of my more controversial philosophical opinions, is that I do think that that ought does not necessarily imply can, but that we cannot have conflicting strong moral obligations. Right, something that it would be wrong not to do, necessarily, that isn't the case. But we can have conflicting obligations, not obligations, we can have conflicting normative claims. Right? So it's a recurring theme in Supernatural. Right. And from what I know about it, yeah, I'm familiar with that type of thing, right? The impossible situation kind of thing, the morally unwinnable situation. Ooh, neato. But at the same time, I don't want to concede that you can get into a moral dilemma through accident or through fate or through somebody else's action. Right. If you are placed into a moral dilemma, or what appears to be a moral dilemma, it's not a dilemma. Doing the least bad thing is your moral obligation in that case if it's not your fault, right? But putting yourself into a situation like that is your moral fault, right? So that's where you've done the wrong thing. And this is where, who was it? In the Old Testament, the reason for, or the illustration for the reason for the Old Testament prohibition against taking oaths, swearing oaths in God's name. All right, the reason for it is you're taking on an obligation. You're taking on an ethical obligation by swearing an oath. You're saying that I will do such and such. The problem there is that if you're taking an unconditional oath like that, you are swearing to do something which may, in fact, be itself unethical. Right? And that is, in fact, the case in the story, right? I forget who, but he swears an oath that he will sacrifice the first thing that comes from his door, comes through his door, expecting it to be an animal, but it turned out to be his daughter, and so he had a moral obligation to obey the oath and sacrifice his daughter, but he also had a moral obligation not to do that because, it would be murder to kill his innocent daughter. Right? So in that case, it was the oath-taking that was the moral fault. He should not have done so, and doing so is, to put it in precise terms, a mortal sin. That's the moral sin. And the reason for that is because whichever path he took after that point would have been necessarily wrong, violating his solemn oath to God on the one hand, murdering his innocent daughter on the other. Right? Both are severely wrong, and so putting yourself into a situation where you have to choose between two necessarily evil actions. That's not good. Well, sorry, Admiral. We were too late.
Finally,
Down you go. It's a lot of armor. I think that's all of the troops, so let's...
one last stop to make, Commander. We owe Kahoku that much. Area secured.
Admiral Kahoku is dead. Despite the ferocity of the creatures he was sealed in with, there are no signs of trauma on his corpse. The needle marks on his arm suggest a different means of execution.
Oh god, it's Admiral Kahoku.
Cerberus must have tracked him down.
Damn. Well, we were too late. But yeah, so I think that is, that's, like I said, probably one of my more controversial ethical opinions, or philosophical opinions in general, is that ought does not necessarily imply can. Now, even not putting yourself into a situation, you can have conflicting moral oughts, right? Have I gone to all of these? Didn't go to this one, I guess. Did I? Thought I did, but maybe not. It said I had one more, so might as well go right there. I think it's that one. But yeah, so that's I think one of my, like I said, my more controversial points. Is this the fact that you can have conflicting normative oughts, right? You ought to do A and you ought to do not A. Right? For example, I mean, an easy example is charitable giving, right? You ought to help the needy, right? But you also ought not to make yourself destitute in order to do so. But those are pretty explicitly conflicting obligations. I already did this. Where am I supposed to go? Hades dogs. Destroy the main Cerberus facility. Where? Oh, okay, different system. Nepheron and the Columbia system, the Voyager cluster. Okay, cool. Let's get out of here. So yeah, I think that is an obvious, right? That's an obvious case there, right? Where we ought to help, but we ought to also help someone else, even if that is ourselves, right? And if that's the case, right, you have conflicting obligations. Even if they're not strong or enforceable obligations, they are still things that we... Wait, was that it? Damn it, I forgot. Oh, I know it was Voyager, but it was down here. Columbia. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, I think you can have opposed normative claims. You can have contradictory normative claims. Now that said, I think that there is a way of sorting that out, which is by examining things like opportunity cost. Trying to figure out what the right thing to do is in those situations is trying to do the most good, and also things like social obligations, right? If you have an obligation to those closer to you before those further away from you, those sorts of things as well. But sort of by default, right? All other things equal, it seems that there could at least be cases where you have equal obligations, right? Not obligations, but equally you could do equal good in more than one way. And you're otherwise indifferent between the two, and so you just have to make a decision, right? And doing so in some case, in doing one will necessarily mean not doing the other, and so you have, opportunity cost problems, and so your moral reasoning winds up being conflicting. And I do think that is a legitimate problem. I wouldn't say it's a problem in the sense of we're forced into sin, I guess. I wouldn't quite say that much in those sorts of cases, in the sorts of cases where we don't sort of bind ourselves to it, or we don't have conflicting strong obligations, right? But if it's a soft obligation, if it's a supererogatory thing, then yeah, I think I don't think doing one rather than the other is a sin. Certainly not a grave sin. Maybe venial, but certainly not grave. But that it's just kind of it's an artifact of our fallenness, right? We and the world we live in are fallen and imperfect as a result of the fall, right? The metaphysical fall, as a result of original sin. All of that. We don't live in a perfect world, and so we cannot make perfect choices. We fundamentally cannot make perfect choices. And it's not just because we ourselves are sinful, but also because the world we live in is imperfect. And so we have to deal with things like scarcity. Right? We have limited time, limited resources, and unlimited wants and needs. And so we're necessarily going to have to come up short on some things, even some moral things. And that's just kind of an artifact of the world we live in. And so my view on this, my take on this, my view that sometimes there are things that we ought to do that we simply cannot. That is a minority position among ethicists. But I think that it's correct, especially because of the fact that our world is imperfect in a really fundamental kind of way. And not just imperfect just because of the nature of reality, but imperfect because it's fallen. It's fallen from perfection, rather than just simply not measuring up to what we would like it to. That kind of thing. Hi, Cerberus. Vaporized. Aw. There we go. Thanks, Caden. All right. Oh, come on.
Heading out.
There we go. All right. Let's go on in here. This might wind up being the last thing we do, and we might not be able to do the side quests that we specifically set out to do, but that's okay. Things happen. I know we set out to do Tally and Rex's side quest, but it's getting to be close enough to midnight that this planet might be the last thing we get to. Okay, everyone, just stop with that. We get it, it's your catchphrase, but ease up on it a little bit, huh? Ooh, sniper got me. Oh, damn it. Forgot I have to use Unity.
It's payback time.
Okay, yeah, I know.
I will destroy you.
And I think that's it. This is the last one. Yep, that's the last one. Ooh! Nice shot, Caden. Caden's got ice bullets. Whee! Oh, God, I threw them directly into Ashley. Sorry, Ash. Alright. So that's, I think, all of that. There's probably more in the other rooms, though, so we gotta stay a little bit frosty. Otherwise, I think that's the last of this little Cerberus cell. Maybe? Oh my gosh, lots of junk. I honestly don't need to do these. Don't give me experience. That I need. That I need. Oh, maybe I don't. Oh, okay. Whatever. Replenish my Omnigel. Yep. I actually don't need to loot anything, I'm realizing, because I'm perfectly equipped, and... There's somebody in here? Perfectly equipped, and I have unlimited money. So, do need Metagel, though, so there we go. Looks sketchy. You cautiously press a few buttons, an alarm chimes. The optical database is flashing. Quickly, you copy as many... Flashing itself, sorry. Quickly, you copy as many files as you can to your hardsuit's internal computer. Its memory wiped, the computer shuts down. The files are sure to be encrypted, but you've got time to crack them. Archive files. And that's it. There's other stuff on this planet, though, so let's wrap that up before we end for tonight. So on the note of the reading group and the actual discussion portion, I'm going to try. I've said this before, but I'm going to try, hopefully tonight or tomorrow, to get a forum together so we can actually have ongoing discussions about the topics of the reading group. I've also been going back through the next text that we're hopefully going to be reading, which is William Kavanaugh's The Myth of Religious Violence. Great book that talks about the sort of development, the development of the concept of religion. The development of the concept of religion and the troubles with what we mean by it today, which are very common in the field of religious studies. His argument is somewhat more radical, that there is no thing called religion, and therefore there is no thing called religious violence per se. And so when we talk about religious violence, his fundamental thesis is that usually we're using that as an excuse to sort of gloss over and justify what we call secular or rational violence. And we should just be talking about violence in general, right? Rather than specifying off some of it as religious and therefore the bad guy violence, and our special secular violence as good guy violence. Yeah, okay, that's it. Anyway, that is the next thing that we have to look forward to. I do have a review of that book up on my WordPress blog, which is hopefully, that blog is hopefully where I'm going to have a forum for discussions of the reading group, or discussions for the reading group. So hopefully that is going to be there, ideally, if that works, if I can manage to get a forum together for it. Otherwise, I will find out some other kind of solution. Maybe I can embed something in there, maybe something else, but I will hopefully find something like that, and that'll be up soonish. But otherwise, I think I'm going to call it there. And I'm going to say goodnight, and I will see hopefully all of you tomorrow, where we were going to be streaming some more Red Dead Redemption 2. If not, hope to see you again next week. Until then, have a good night.